Hey YouTube, this is my second video, and this video is going to be another project for Mr. Montgomery's class, Monty. It's going to be a second portfolio of us covering chapters 4 through 6 with one strength and one weakness per chapter. Alright, so let's take a look. Alright, for chapter 4 we learned about triangles. Triangle congruence is a matter of fact. So my main strengths for this chapter were like the easiest thing in the world, which is classifying triangles as acute, right, obtuse, equilateral, equiangular, isosceles, and scalene. And here I have some examples of different types of triangles. On the far left you can see the obtuse isosceles triangle, which is labeled correctly. In the middle is equilateral, equiangular, and acute. And a fact about equilateral, equiangular is that you can't have one without the other, and that anything like that is always going to be acute. It's impossible to have any obtuse angles. And on the far right, I have a scalene right triangle. Continuing on with chapter 4, we have the weaknesses. My main weaknesses are proofs on triangle congruence. And here I have an example of like the hardest one I could find. So the given information about this triangle to the right, these four triangles, is that QT is the perpendicular bisector of US, and that QV is congruent to QR, and that angle VQR is congruent to angle RQS. And what we have to prove is that QUV is congruent to QSR. Alright, so the first step we take is by stating the given that QT is perpendicular bisector to US. Second thing we need to do is say that UT is congruent to TS. And the reason for that is a definition of perpendicular bisectors. Number 3 is angle QT is congruent to angle QTS, because right angles are always congruent. Number 4 is QT is congruent to QT by the reflexive property of congruence. Number 5 is triangle QTU is congruent to triangle QTS by the side angle side or SAS theorem. 6, QU is congruent to QS by CPCTC, which is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. 7, we have QV is congruent to QR, which is more given statements. So is 8, another given, angle VQR is congruent to angle RQS. And finally, you can prove that triangle QUV is congruent to triangle QSR. Once again, by side angle side or SAS. Now moving right along into chapter 5, properties of triangles. We have my strengths, which are mid-segments, which I always remember from class as Monty describing as the Zelda Triforce. That's how I always remember what a mid-segment is. So mid-segment connects the points of the sides, forming a similar triangle inside the original. They are also half the length of the side that they are parallel to. So that would make in this picture MN be parallel to XY, and MN equal to half of XY, which you can determine by the answers. Now continuing with chapter 5, we have my weaknesses. My weaknesses are that I'm always mixing up the altitudes, the medians, and the angle bisectors. The other thing I'm mixing up is which goes with which for the points that they intersect at, which are the orthocenter for altitudes, the centroid for medians, and the incenter for angle bisectors. Here I have 3 examples. In this picture to the left, you can see that RT is an altitude to the base QS because RT is perpendicular to QS. So any perpendicular point coming from an angle is going to be an altitude. Now, PS is a median to base QR because P is the midpoint of RQ, or QR. And that, you can tell, is a median because medians have to go to the middle of the triangle, but do not necessarily have to be perpendicular to the base. Number 3 is that QU is also an angle bisector of triangle QRS because it bisects angle RQS. So basically, an angle bisector cuts the angle in half, and depending on the triangle, it will not cut it in half, or sometimes it can cut it in half. Some fun facts about these guys is that if the triangle is equilateral / equiangular, then the altitudes, medians, and angle bisectors are all on the same lines. So therefore, point D at my picture to the right is the orthocenter, centroid, and the incenter of triangle ABC. Alright, that about wraps things up for part 1. Please click on the annotation to go to part 2 to see about chapters 6 and 7. See you there.